Coming up on today's After News, Travis Scott done with WWE already?
A former NXT star has talked about a breakdown that he experienced.
CM Punk reveals the secret rule for WWE top stars.
And are new titles coming to AEW this year or next?
I'm Michael Hamflett.
I'm Michael Sidgwick.
And this is the After News. Yes, and we start, of course, with Travis Scott and some information that's come from Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer that has kind of lent itself to a lot of speculation about what exactly is going on between Scott and WWE. Since now, I guess, for the second PLE in as many months, he has been seemingly removed from plans to catch everybody up. Travis Scott was initially rumoured to be part of Money in the Bank with John Cena. That spot went to Logan Paul against Cody Rhodes and Jey Uso. And then rumours intensified that he was to be featured in a prominent role at SummerSlam. As it turns out, that appears to have gone to Jelly Roll. There's obviously been already sort of like overlap stuff they've done with Jimmy Kimmel. That's seen as like the celebrity match at this year's show. But this is to do with apparently Travis Scott and WWE maybe being a bit of an impasse. Dave Meltzer reported in the Wrestling Observer newsletter that plans have had to change due to, quote, Scott's lack of commitment. Quote, he doesn't like to commit to anything, he goes half in and sometimes tries other projects at the same time. It was Meltzer that said that it was Scott who was in for the major role at SummerSlam, but it, quote, fell apart and Jelly Roll got the shot instead. This adds to a comment made by WrestleVote, who said, quote, I heard he was not a quick learner for the business. There was some crucial training sessions that apparently Travis Scott missed. That wasn't specified if it was for Money in the Bank or for SummerSlam, just that there seems to be this kind of half in, half out attitude from Travis Scott. And, you know, with celebrities, I guess, once you are in for the wrestlers you're working with and for your own, obviously, well-being and safety and all that, you need to be there to get all the practice in. Travis Scott might be a case of in like a lion, out like a lamb in 2025. Obviously part of one of the ultimately most shocking WWE angles ever in the form of the John Cena heel turn, was very involved rather than just being the weirdo stood in the corner. Potatoed Cody Rhodes, of course. Got his receipt with that kind of spiked crossroads at WrestleMania, but again, heavily involved in the biggest main event of the year, WWE's Night 2 main event at WrestleMania, where he took a full rendition of Fiend to get to the ring. Maybe just added to his Spotify streams, I don't know, before he did anything out there. So he's caught in a lot of controversy as an on-screen character, but now that seems to be overlapping with things behind the scenes as well. Plans changing, commitment being questioned. This doesn't bode well with what we know historically about WWE and celebrity figures, does it?
Yeah, it's so weird, right? How one of the most famous angles, heel turns in pro wrestling and indeed WWE history is also the kind of thing that you're going to one day expect to see on, I don't know, if you go on Twitter, WWE images that were immediately forgotten about. Like all these strange, random occurrences that you go, oh yeah, that happened.
He was there.
He was there. Or Tatanka was in that Battle Royal.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, John Cena turned heel. I mean, it shouldn't work like that, but indeed it has. It feels like a completely different time period in WWE history. It scanned as strange from the off. That someone with no real prior association with Cena would be sort of so heavily involved and even present to begin with in the heel turn angle. The main event of WrestleMania felt infamously botched literally as it was unfolding. And then again, as Hamflett points out, kind of radio silence since. When you hear nothing about this sort of thing, you can sort of fill in the gaps yourself, whether that's cynical or otherwise. It just felt like, yeah, they didn't like the ending either. They are cognizant as everybody else. That has not worked whatsoever. And if you sort of connect the dots between the WrestleVotes report and then this latest one in the Observer newsletter, it just feels like something they rather wish didn't happen and are now kind of half in the process of pretending did not happen. It was so odd, like they barely touched on the selling of the soul stuff in the immediate aftermath of the Elimination Chamber angle happening. Put it this way, I read this report over the weekend and I was not surprised by it one bit.
Everything in 2026 in WWE feels like it's constantly part of the Rock and Triple H chess match, doesn't it, as well? Travis Scott was an ally of The Rock, who, of course, wanted to get Cody Rhodes' soul in real life, so we were told, and ultimately had to settle for John Cena, a historic heel. I'll take that then.
I'll take that then.
Cody Rhodes continues to, like, bring it up.
It's like a panic buy.
Yeah.
To use football, soccer parlance, like Cena was like a panic buy.
Like one of the biggest stars ever.
Yeah.
Cody continues to bring him up. He did so on SmackDown, saying how it was like one of the obstacles he had to overcome. So it's like, Cody Rhodes with a certain, I guess, loyalty to where we're at in storylines and an attempt to keep continuity when otherwise, as you point out, there's been like radio silence. It doesn't feel like, well, none of it really felt like it was Triple H's story, and he likes to kind of keep to his plotting. And when that gets, we see it with so many stories now where there does feel like there's interjections from on high that maybe Triple H, in the way that he plots, can't really cope with, and then you get this colliding of these two forces. And I think it's just going to be a constant. It feels like a feedback loop that's going to happen in every WrestleMania season, specifically going forward, doesn't it?
Yeah, wasn't there also talk that Travis Scott was meant to work a tag at Money in the Bank?
Yeah.
And it just...
That was the Logan Paul, John Cena alliance that kind of felt like it was cobbled together. It's no smoke without fire.
No smoke without fire.
If, of course, you want to... How can I tie this one in? I can't. If you're watching WWE and thinking, whoa, that is fire. If only I could watch it with greater ease. Well, then you can use NordVPN, of which you can get a 76% off offer. It's an unbelievable offer. We've had loads of uptake on it this month. So we're keeping it going until the end of the month. 76% off, 4 months free, and a $50 Amazon gift card. All the information is in the link in the description to this video. NordVPN, the best in the business, the recognised leader in VPNs. That's not even their catchphrase. That's me saying it because I've used it in the past. 76% off, 4 months free, $50 Amazon gift card. All the information in the video description.
Indeed, absolutely. Our second story, you might have to bear with me with this. It seems like a little bit difficult to tackle. It's about a sensitive subject, and the the subject of the story is understandably reluctant to, be a little bit cagey and evasive, and there's more allusions than accusations here. But the former Eddie Thorpe, Carl Fredericks, who was signed to much publicity to NXT in line with his sort of buzz and his reputation as one of the next best things in professional wrestling. He did some unbelievable stuff as a prodigy in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Very, very handsome, very, very adept at pro wrestling, very, very early. He just looked like one of a prodigy, like a genuine prodigy in pro wrestling. Made the move to NXT, didn't particularly work out. Rebranded as Eddie Thorpe. He had a sort of a cartoonish gimmick as a disc jockey. It didn't really work out, and I think he himself obviously has felt this. He requested his release, and now he's no longer with WWE. But he spoke with Wrestle Raps to allege, I don't think accuse isn't necessarily the word, but he sort of alleges that when he, and I'm not disputing this part of the story at all, but when he had a breakdown and wasn't feeling remotely mentally well, he really wanted to speak to Shawn Michaels to, clarify his future, let his feelings be known. He just really wanted to speak specifically to Shawn Michaels. And he says, Eddie Thorpe, that Shawn might not necessarily have been particularly forthcoming. Now, he didn't say, Eddie Thorpe, that Shawn Michaels outright avoided him, but it does seem, it really is worth going out of your way to read the full transcript of the interview or listening to said interview itself. Again, it's quite a complex subject matter. It's probably better that you hear this personally from Eddie Thorpe, Carl Fredericks himself. But the basic gist is that it seems that Shawn Michaels, to a degree, was putting off a meeting, talking about how he was busy and there's certain NXT days that are just go and not the time for meetings. And that also, he was like, have you got a wellness check from medical? That should be the priority. So there's two sides of a story that hasn't really been completely articulated yet. But that is the story. Carl Fredericks potentially indicating that the lines of communication in NXT with this sort of thing are less than ideal.
Yeah, he kind of summed up the experience by saying, by the end he was kind of ready to ask for his release, and once that was in play, it was sort of done.
Yeah,
fairly straightforward. That it had reached the point where it didn't feel like the conversation he desperately needed was forthcoming. I think there is a delicate human element to this story, isn't there? Where Shawn Michaels will presumably feel like he's followed the protocol, and yes, wellness have contacted. Yeah. It is not simply a case of
Because Shawn's probably in his head saying, I'm not really qualified to deal with this.
Yeah. Follow policy, gone are the days. And like this was revealing, I suppose, gone are the days where it's the idea of like shut up and get to work or tape it up and go, whatever those old sort of adages were. And there's just a complete lack of interest in mental health, full stop. This is something, I guess, that there's a protocol that's to be followed. And Eddie Thorpe was followed.
Still seems less than ideal.
Was not given the follow-up he wanted and requested, it seems, multiple times, that conversation with Shawn Michaels. And again, I think if you've ever been in an experience like this where you're desperate for that specific conversation with that specific person that feels like they can really help and you're not getting it, it does then, the wall just feels like it's getting built bigger and bigger and bigger in front of you, doesn't it? And it's not going to sort of maybe aid like whatever recovery that Thorpe needed to go through. Again, same as Sid really, you don't want to speak on this guy's behalf when he kind of articulates it so well himself. An interesting run. I think we'll like reflect back on this one. Like you mentioned about the Travis Scott image as being like, remember when this happened? Like in a rarity for NXT, Eddie Thorpe was one of the only people to sort of have a physical altercation with Shawn Michaels on screen.
And you thought that must mean something.
Yeah, he inadvertently crashed into Ava, and that brought Shawn out of his like producer's role, and he was like, don't you ever lay a hand on her, that kind of thing. And yeah, like that so rarely happens on NXT. Shawn Michaels is quite disciplined with his own persona as the boss of that show, that it did feel like it was leading to somewhere. Thorpe had like a mini program over the NXT title just around Christmas time when they were at the Laurel. That kind of was centered around him, wasn't it? And I guess obviously the two sides have kind of fallen away a little bit. Thorpe being kind of bold enough and open and honest enough to speak about his mental health issues as well. He talks about getting the call on the same day that Dakota Kai, his real life partner, got her release as well. So can't have been the easiest time, I guess, for those two to be going through that together. So it's pretty cool that I think he's come out and spoken about, honestly, and we certainly invite you to go and check out the Wrestle Rap for the whole kind of interview with that. Switching gears a little bit to, I guess, a bit of coverage of the upcoming and hotly anticipated WWE Unreal documentary. CM Punk has been speaking about it. He's one of the featured people in the trailer. Amongst the likes of Charlotte Flair and Triple H and some of the absolute John Cena, I think some of the top stars that are going to be included in Unreal. But he's been sort of on the media junket, I guess, and he's been sort of speaking to various people. This was from Sport Bible, where he was talking about a secret rule that is afforded to some of the top stars and how you'll see a bit of that within Unreal. And it's in relation to promo time specifically. He says, it's one of the secret rules. As long as it's really, really good, you can get away with it. Go 20 minutes over and you suck, that's no good. I don't want to cut into anyone's segment, and if there's a lot of times when I have some time and I don't think I need all of it, I'll just go out there and cut it short. I would rather go short than long. He says, that's a lot
I wish every single wrestler and promoter would borrow that philosophy.
Know your value and get in and get out.
Yeah, in matches, everything.
It's funny, he goes on to talk about it. He says, that's the way a lot of the talent work together. I know there's a lot of and he references here, a lot of the Bloodline segments are stuff with The Rock. When it's really good and the crowd's going absolutely banana for it, you can't really rush through it. That's something I've had to pull people aside and explain to them. He also references about how this can occur in matches, to that your point as well. If you have a producer that's panicking and they're hitting the button and screaming at the referee then panics and starts screaming at the talent. And if you're in there with the wrong person, they're going to start to panic. I've been in there panicking with referees. I've been in there with referees that are panicking at me, where I calmly turn to them and I go, shut the F up, calm down. But that's just a level of experience speaking through. I can very much see how the lesser experienced people might struggle with that. So yeah, to that point, we're in a kind of, still, relatively speaking, a new era for WWE in how there is obviously more wiggle room than there used to be than the Vince McMahon era, but it's still WWE. It's still the most polished version of itself, often to its detriment and often to, like a style that has just alienated fans for generations.
Not him, he loves it.
No, not for me, I like it. But I think we've seen, and there's loads of evidence, it's not just CM Punk here, there's loads of evidence that over the years, there is clearly a kind of like an unwritten line, a Champions League, if you will, of talent that are permitted to make their choices and then be accountable for them after the fact, asking for forgiveness rather than permission, versus the ones who very clearly are not experienced enough, follow the rules, and then sometimes get exposed for it.
Yeah.
It's better this way, I think. Big picture, it is better this way. You want to earn that respect to be able to take those chances, as CM Punk outlines here. We heard, I can't remember who it was, it might have been Seth Rollins, but certainly some talent being outspoken about The Rock's swearing, for example, in those 20 to 25 minute TV segments that sees everything else gets cut. Unfortunately, And these rules are unwritten for a reason, but I do think it is subjective. And when the big stars are in town, you probably do have to go case by case.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think CM Punk's being, and I suffer from PDS myself, punk derangement syndrome on occasion, but I think he's been entirely reasonable. And, you know, there's always that talk of, is he wiser and mature and more mellow, or is he just a complete sellout? I don't know.
Why not both?
Why not both? But I do think it's something that he says, you know, like, I don't think he would enjoy watching 40 minutes of like the bloodline drama and melodrama and all the rest of it, but you know, he knows reactions are king in this business, and if you can get them, no matter how long it takes, and you know, I wish everything was shorter. Honestly, I wish everything in professional wrestling, to a degree, was shorter. But no, it's funny because he has got that opinion. Was it Sheamus? I'm fairly certain it was Sheamus. I really hope it's Sheamus because I hate it when something comes to the top of my head, and I don't want to misattribute something to someone who called a particularly almost egregiously long bloodline segment. So it's a wrestling show, it's WWE, it's not the Young and the Restless. So I can understand if this is all going on.
Drew's been saying, yeah, get a push if your surname's Fatu, maybe they should Drew Fatu.
So I can understand why certain wrestlers would get annoyed by that, but ultimately, like, it's just the way everything goes in every entertainment field. If you're a star and you've got the people, you're going to get the time to do that over and over again because you're dependable. So I can completely see why this unwritten rule rather exists. And if anything, right, like if you're a wrestler and you've got your time cut because Roman Reigns is agonizing over the decision to do whatever in the ring, right, and you've got not much time to be able to do something, I think that's a challenge that more wrestlers should take on. Yeah. The amount of matches I see these days that go 18 minutes, and there's just no justification for how long they go. Or like some of the best promos of all time, literally Austin 316, Hard Times. Some of the best promos of all time have gone 2 minutes. You know, you do not need, right, a long time to do anything. That's what I get told.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not about how long it lasts, right? It's about the emotion in the moment.
Yeah. That's how good you are.
It's not about the size.
No,
the time allocation.
Yeah. It's duration.
It's about the emotion that takes place during it. Do you know, a lot of these...
some hard times go 2 minutes, you know?
If anything, long enough. Coach Punk jumps out to me in times like this. You know, I was just openly auditioning for Shawn Michaels' job, even though, like, Triple H.
He says it himself.
There's another sort of like kernel of knowledge that I think it's worth imparting, but it's wrestling, it's so difficult. To have the hyper confidence to run short on live TV when you know you've hit your marks, you've made your point, you can get out of there. Like that's great advice for talent, but choosing the night in which you take that advice must be so difficult.
Oh God, I know.
Like Punk, it's not easy for Punk to say that. You've got to earn that confidence from management in your ability. But I endorse wrestlers saying, I've said everything I need to say. I've got 5 minutes here. I'm going to get the hell out of it. Because you're doing that for the benefit of your colleagues as well, aren't you? It's a good lesson in and of itself, albeit one that's very different. This always, Punk and stuff like this always reminds me of like Roy Keane. He was the manager of my team, Sunderland, for a bit, and then sometimes it must just be like watching, go out there and be as good as I was at football. Can't, boss. Yeah. Right there, it's one of them things, how do you sort of pass that on to talent, I guess, but I'm all in favour of like using the time that you need rather than necessarily what you're given, whether that's more or less. It's to the benefit, I think, of the actual quality of the work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've just said that I think everything in wrestling, promos, the back and forths, so many of the matches go on too long. That's one of my bugbears. Another bugbear of mine is that every wrestling booker of prominence seems to be obsessed, fixated with the idea of adding too many titles to their on-screen product. I was prepared to have a little rant when I first heard the whispers of this sort of thing, but I've mellowed and I've changed my mind. Sige, what are you talking about? Good question. I will specify. And I also want to stress as well that this is not necessarily a news report, an indication that something is definitely going to happen, or this like double, triple, quadruple corroborated thing. It was Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select in a Q&A portion of the website speculating, okay? Maybe he's heard something, maybe he hasn't, but this was not framed as a report. That's very important to get in front of. But Sean Ross Sapp speculates that he can see, personally, that AEW will or might launch AEW Women's World Tag Team titles within the year, citing the fact that you can see some pairings come together, you know, Tekla and Julia Hart, as Sky Blue on the periphery there have come together. Willow Nightingale and Chris Statlander seem to be, they're going to make friends after one last fight. It would seem they seem to be tied together in storylines. Anna Jay and Harley Cameron also, it just seems to be grouping off, and maybe that's conspicuous. My initial thought was, we do not need more titles. Titles are so often a crutch. They excuse a lack of imagination. Instead of like plotting this careful, emotional, intriguing story, you can simply base a feud around the titles. Very easy. You can see why, it sounds like too much like hard work to tell a proper story, just feud over a title. However, the women's division, despite peaking incredibly highly in AEW over the last year with the Hollywood ending and that wonderful match at All In and the dual rise of Mercedes Moné and Toni Storm that allowed that match to happen, the parity's still terrible, realistically, at least on Dynamite. I know it's a little bit better on Collision, but the one women's match per week is just beyond a joke at this point. At this point, I'm thinking any excuse to feature the women more heavily, even if it is a booking crutch like a title, and honestly, get rid of that TNT title. Get rid. It's not felt prestigious in years. I believe in Kyle Fletcher and Dustin Rhodes to tell a good story around it, but so often I'm going to ask, then what? But this title's not been strong. It feels like it's been used in literally the opposite way around, where they want the belt to make the man. It's not the way around it goes. Scrap a title. You could argue the trios one should realistically be on the bubble as well. They don't care to tell too many stories around that. I know it's been folded into the wider Death Rider stuff, but before then, very little in the way of like, what's your favourite trios title program or feud?
Yeah.
I mean, it's off the top of your head. I mean, there's just nothing realistically. Good matches, obviously, but yeah, on a one-in, one-out basis, I think the women deserve better parity. I think so many of them have earned the actual opportunity to have, something crazy like a second match on Dynamite, So I'm actually in favour of this, even though it breaks a rule that no one's going to listen to anyway.
Yeah, it's like, I think you do have to sort of treat this case on its own merits, don't you? Because specifically of it being the women's division and North American wrestling's relationship with women's wrestling. Typically with belts, I'm completely with you in this era. My wife has a rule when I buy mugs and t-shirts that if I want to get one new one, I've got to get rid of two old ones, otherwise you just stack up and stack up and stack up. And I wish that wrestling would apply that with its titles. However, I will hold my hands up. WWE introduced the United States title and the Intercontinental title in early 2025. They've had mixed success with both belts, but the US title was supremely effective as a vehicle for Chelsea Green. The Intercontinental title, full stop, has been well booked on Raw, and a division has grown around it. I would still rather you had one title and just other storylines. Yeah. Imagine that. But the belts, if nothing else, have been active storyline drivers for the women.
Look what they've done to Lyra Valkyria,
Yeah, we are witnessing weeks of WWE television. Last Monday's Raw was one example, but I know there's been more this year, where the first hour passes without actually a men's segment, and you don't even really notice because there are just multiple programs happening. If you've got the multiple belts, ideally you want other programs underneath, and I think WWE of late have probably only really had, unless I'm forgetting an obvious one, Jade Cargill and Naomi took place before Naomi became Women's World Champion. But it is ultimately, obviously, to drive them to titles. You're getting that previously with Alexa Bliss and Charlotte Flair. They're now working towards the women's tag team titles.
Yeah, that's the thing. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. Yeah. I think the Charlotte Flair, Alexa Bliss stuff, which is really working when you thought like Charlotte Flair's career was frankly in the bin at the start of this year. But they've told a story that's then going to get sort of like folded into a title picture. That's the way around it. There can be compromises. They're not mutually exclusive. But no, it feels like the AEW women's division, it just needs a bit more time and dedication and profile, because the creatives there, in the case of a lot of stars, if you look at Tekla and Queen Aminata's sort of duel that they're having on a weekly basis in AEW right now, it seems like people are really truly connecting with the division and the stars within it. So like, why the hell not at this point?
Tag belts, especially as well, create the visual of a bigger division because you need numbers by its very nature. So the idea that you say if it was, for example, the rich history of 4 ways and you have a 4-way to determine the first champions, there's 8 women out there getting profiled. Yeah. That's 6 more than you might typically see on an edition of Dynamite. So it's nothing if not helpful in that regard. Let us know what you think about the potential of women's tag belts in AEW and all the stories we've discussed on the news this afternoon. There's a morning news that's gone out as well, talking about controversial WWE figures and some big returns and shocks at TNA Slammiversary, which I believe, thank you in advance, Ryan, for making us look good today, you can check out right here. We'll see you soon.
Top dollar nut nodder.
It's good stuff.